We're partners here, so this is just another thing of that. We don't have a big formal agenda or a formal presentation for this morning. This is really a chance to answer questions, to just share among ourselves kind of what we're feeling, what we're thinking. I might start with just a couple of sort of administrative things, just so you know. As we said from the front last week, we expect that we will have an interim person while we do a national search. The bishop makes this appointment, and so the bishop is really the one who drives this process, but he has been in close contact with us. He came in and did meet with the governance board and the PPRC. And he understands the very special place that Asbury has in the conference and nationally. And he understands that it will take a national search to find the right person, probably. And that's not ruling anything out. It's just that we want to make sure we leave everything open to all opportunities. During this time, we expect that we will put together a sort of a transition team, a small leadership group to liaison with the bishop, but certainly the governance board and the PPRC will be heavily involved. Our first task is to update our church profile and really try to create a document which is really hard to capture the incredible vibrancy of this place. I mean, this is such a special place, and to try to put that into a document so that somebody who's a candidate looks at it and says, whoa, that's really where I want to be. So that's sort of step one. And we'll also be working on trying to define a list of the most important characteristics of who we're looking for, so that we also have that to help guide us. And as part of that process, we will try to have a series of kind of open meetings with various constituencies in the church. So those of you who are involved in one or another way will get a chance to try to give us your direct input. So we want to listen a lot, and we'll do our very best to try to synthesize that. Jim, do you want to add anything to that before we open it up?
I think L25 handled that really well. So I think L25 handled that really well. I don't have anything to add, but this can be sort of thought of as the first of the sessions that we're going to be having to get views and feedback from members of the congregation. So please do feel free to ask us questions that you might have. And I'm going to pull out a pad, and that way I can just kind of take a couple of notes of things that you're asking, if you don't mind.
We just want to make sure we capture. Paula's got a mic, and we'll just pass it around, and this is your session. The one thing that I would say that is going to be at least my personal mantra through all of this is we are going to continue to do good. And continuing the good is how we will attract the right person. That's the most important thing we can do, is to not miss a beat here, because that will bring in the right person. So, all right, Paula, yeah.
Hi, can you just quickly go over kind of the whole schedule for the hiring process and when all this might occur? I know Stephen's leaving early January, and we'll have an interim pastor for a while. But after, when do you think all this will take place, and kind of what are the actual steps you go through?
I'll let Stephen comment on his departure time, and then we can fill in a little after that.
Sure, and I'm trying to figure out if it's helpful to have me here or not in this session. I certainly don't. There may be some things that need to be shared that are not helpful for me to be in the room for. So I want to make sure if there are questions of me that maybe I'll duck. I just want to be mindful of that. So let me start by saying my departure time, January 21st is my last Sunday, and the reason for that is I wrote in my letter, they wanted me to start January 1st. I said, I can't do that, I want July 1st, and they said, you can't do that, and So I have to start down there March 1st, basically, but January 21st, then I have to spend the next 2.5 weeks down there, and then come up and kind of pack up my office and, work with the family, and then I'll drive down. So that's sort of why that timing works. So January 21st is my last Sunday.
We don't know the exact timing of when an interim will be identified. We're going to work as fast as we possibly can. Hopefully we will have somebody in place who can sort of help with some transition with Stephen by then. We don't know how long our search will take. We are going to push it as fast as we can, our national search, but we are also going to be very deliberate to make sure we really do our diligence, that we find the person who is right for this place. And we're kind of going to use all the sources we have to feed names to the bishop. The bishop is reached out to all the bishops nationally to look for this. We're trying to mine any of Stephen's contacts, which are significant around the country. My hope would be that this could be a process of months, but it could take longer. And we will just do what we need to do to make sure that we don't rush into something that's not right for us. So I wish I had a better answer.
Just number one, Stephen, thank you for the sermon with the reminder to the congregation that the dreams going forward are the dreams of the congregation, and that as a church, we need to be making those, where do we want to be in 5 years? So that was really helpful. My question has to do with the fact that several years ago, we went to a new governance model that put a lot of authority and control of staffing and all of those things in our senior pastor. And with Stephen, utmost faith in how that is done. As we move forward, is this something that the governing board and other committees might want to readdress until we know who we have coming in and what their strengths and gifts will be? Do we want to put all the eggs in a basket? Or how do we change, or do we need to change that?
Yep. There are a lot of nuances in that governance policy book, and part of them are driven by the Book of Discipline, of being part of the Methodist Church. Some of them are more in our discretion. I think that balance between the congregation, governance, and the pastor is a critical one, and it's certainly, worth paying attention to. So.
And if it's okay, I'll just add into that having been in the position, the new governance structure offers 1,000 times more oversight of me than was there before the new governance structure. So whomever is in that role, I think the new governance structure is a huge step forward for the congregation to ensure that the strategy and the forward thinking of the congregation is centered in the congregation. It's hard to describe, and maybe from the outside it seems like the reverse, but it's actually been the opposite, and in a really good and healthy way. So I want to reassure the congregation from that.
Mm-hmm. Don has got something.
Not a governance structure suited to the size of the congregation. And the new, relatively new now governance structure really positions the senior
a little concerned about the selection process of the new pastor. Will the committee, along with the bishop, jointly select the new pastor? Because the reason I'm saying it, because say 3 or 4 years ago, we had a pastor in the church I was attending, I believe, and there was a representative in the district came out, and we explained what we were looking for in a new pastor and everything like that. And shortly after, we got a pastor, really didn't do all the things that we wanted. We didn't have no say. It was selected down from, I think, the bishop on down. So I'm wondering, does this committee jointly look at the prospects and pick jointly with the bishop?
Repeat the question, please.
Certainly, it's a really good question.
We're going to repeat the
I'm good.
question.
It's a really good question, and it has to do with what's the relationship between our transition committee here at church and the bishop and the district superintendent in terms of selecting the new pastor, right? That's, I think, the gist of what was asked. What happened in the church that you referenced is the way things go by the Methodist discipline, and that is not quite how things are going to go for us. And the bishop has committed that it will go otherwise. So technically, what happens, and even the bishop will set it up this way, is that the search committee is made up of the bishop, the district superintendents from the different districts, and a couple of other people involved at the conference level. There is no provision in the way the Methodist Church is organized for the individual church to have a member on that search committee. There was a search a couple of pastors ago, Mark Rawls was here, some of you may remember, where we did things differently. Not entirely sure what the politics was at that time that led to our having an internal search committee, but we did. That was a true exception and is not something that is going to happen this time around. So we have an internal group that will, as Beth suggested, canvass everybody, get input, look at what we want and need, the qualities and characteristics, and we'll be the liaison with the bishop and the bishop's cabinet as they do the search. The bishop has told us that if they identify somebody, and bear in mind, we're going to be giving them lots of ideas of possible candidates. If they identify somebody they think might be appropriate, we will have a chance to look at that person, their credentials, their record. Do they align with our vision? Do they share our values of inclusivity and outreach? You know, how do they stand on all those issues? And the bishop has said that we will have the ability to say, no, this person is not the right person for our church as far as we can tell. And we will not have to accept the proposed appointment. So that's not provided for in the rules anywhere. The bishop has agreed to do that, in part, I think, because the bishop values the nature of our church and the work that we do. And it's, to add one thing to Beth said earlier, it's very clear to me that not only does the bishop know what we do in the conference and what we're doing in the city of Rochester, he likes what we do in the city of Rochester. He supports that, and he actually, I think, is glad to see a church doing these kinds of things, and in terms of his own values, seems quite aligned with our values. That's not always been the case, as you know, but with this bishop, that is the case, and so we're heartened by that. Did that answer the question sufficiently? Yep.
Before we go to another question, Stephen is going to leave shortly, but if anybody has a question that they want to ask of Stephen before he goes, let's do that right now, and then we'll circle back, I promise. We've got one over here, Paula.
Stephen, just a quick question about your other duties outside of Asbury in the conference. Will you be still reporting to Upper New York? And will you still be going to General Conference?
Yes, so I am still a member of the Upper New York Annual Conference, which means that I'll be here regularly fulfilling those duties. That's a part of my role and my job, as well as I'm still a delegate to General Conference and Jurisdictional Conference. So I'll be maintaining those connections. And my prayer would be that I would make, because when you're serving in an extension ministry, you need to have a local church that is your church. So my prayer is that Asbury First would be hold my charge here in the Upper New York Conference.
Any other questions of Stephen while he's here? We've got another one here.
I just want to make sure you have a chance to ask things that it may not be helpful for me to be in the room for. So.
I feel a profound sense of loss, Stephen, and I'm hopeful, but I just want to tell you how much you have meant to me personally. I want to thank you for how far you've brought this congregation, and I know that we will continue to move forward with your love and your blessing in what you are doing, but I personally want to say thank you because you have been a highlight in our lives, and I just want you to know that.
Thank you, Kathy.
Amen. Other questions while Stephen is here? Thank you.
Okay.
All right, we had a question we put off over here. And we've got lots, so we'll...
What can we do to help you?
Keep doing what you're doing. I mean, I'm deadly serious. I mean, the vibrancy of this place, I mean, we rock the house. I mean, we do so much in the outreach center. The music stirs our souls. I mean, the people bake cookies. I mean, it's overwhelming what this congregation does. And if they just keep doing what they're doing, that will be the greatest help of all, because that really will make this a place that lots of people will want to come. It was somebody on Jim's committee the other day, it said a wonderful story. He said, we're not a fixer-upper. You know, we are strong. And if we stay strong through this, what that will demonstrate to somebody is that we have something really lasting here. I mean, we have a real foundation here for what we're doing, and if that will be very attractive. So, and the second thing is, please, please, please give us your input. We're going to provide a bunch of opportunities for that, formal and informal. We'll get out the names of those who are on the transition team also. Talk to the governing board members, talk to the PPRC members, because we are going to gather just as much information and as much sense of the congregation of what's important to you as we can during this time, and that's going to be really important. So.
I'd just like to add that one of the wonderful things that Stephen has done for this church is that he's inspired so many of us to take on different roles and to work in the different ministries here. And as Stephen said today, that church is more than the building and it's more than the pastor. And not only will doing what we've been doing more good in that way, help us attract the right new pastor, but it also is a testament to the job that Stephen did and is doing while he's here. That it's something that will stand on its own when he goes down to Texas and will be thriving when he comes back to visit. I think that's one of the hallmarks of the way Stephen organized things and inspired all of us.
Many of you know that Paul and I attended Third Church for almost 10 years because of the rules of the Methodist Church and not having a pastor attend the church that he's leaving. And so we experience their experience of interimness. And I'm concerned at how soon that will be happening here, or maybe happening here, and who the pool of people would be that would be likely to be chosen as an interim. I wondered if maybe you can speak to that. And in the Presbyterian system, it just takes forever. Paul called it spiritus interruptus, because whatever the church was doing, it tends not to when they lose a pastor. And I would prefer not to see that here.
Well, that's also a really good question about how smooth is the transition going to be to an interim, how accustomed is the conference to putting interims in place. So the bishop knows and understands our interest in getting an interim, supports it, wants an interim for this church. It is not necessarily the traditional model in the Methodist Church to do that, but clearly a church of this size with everything we have going on, the bishop understands that we need an interim. And there's several things that are happening with respect to that. Stephen is reaching out to many of the ministers that he knows through different groups that he belongs to nationally of progressive clergy, progressive Methodist clergy, to see if any of them might be interested. There's some Methodist clergy who have been displaced by the recent split in the church because, their churches wound up going to the global church and they don't have a home. And so that's another source of potential interims. The bishop probably has some people that he's thought about too, but he hasn't surfaced that with us. But I totally agree that having this happen reasonably smoothly is going to be important. And I think that we'll do all that we can. The rest of the staff will continue here, and the lay leadership will be on board throughout this, and we have a very strong group of committees throughout the church, which I think will help. But you're right, the interim, that can be a dicey situation that we just want to make sure gets handled fairly quickly, and that we have somebody that is also compatible with our values.
The good news is for the interim, I think we don't have to go through some extended call process, that in fact, working with the bishop, who again, has committed to us, he's not going to put somebody here who we say that's the most awful person that we ever saw. But I think he understands the urgency of this and the need to keep things moving. So whether it will happen or not, my prayer is we'll have somebody identified by the time Stephen leaves. Whether we'll be able to do that, I don't know. So.
Okay, I have a few questions. I'm sorry if it's redundant. You might have answered them before, but one of my questions is, did the bishop have to approve Stephen's leaving? That's one. Number two, who's on the search and on the transition team?
Two things. I don't know if you all could hear in the back. Did the bishop have to approve Stephen's leaving? The answer is no. He can't force someone to stay in a position, but I think he understood Stephen's reasons for leaving, and I think he is committed to what Stephen is committed to and understood the importance to Methodism nationally for Stephen to do what he's doing. And so he, like all of us, we're sad, we're heartbroken. I found out about this, I went home and had a good cry. And then, but then we pick ourselves up and we figure out what we're all about. And I'm sure the bishop, has struggled with this also, but is supportive. So, and help me with the second half of your question.
The second half is how is the search committee going to be constituted?
Oh, okay. We're working right now. As you can imagine, things have been happening at warp speed, and we're putting together the transition team right now. We will hopefully within the next week be able to get that out to people so they know. But we're working on that, and we want to also consult with the PPRC and the governance board to make sure we've got the right mix of people on that. And but we should have that published in the very near future. The transition team is our equivalent of the old search committee. There isn't a formal search committee because that really is the bishop's purview, but our transition team is how do we shape this process so it works to what we need? Okay?
So I wanted to just make a plug for folks getting their dreams on the dream board, because I think that's another way we can help inform the process as a congregation, is to get your ideas up there. What do you want Asbury to look like in the years to come? We're cataloging those dreams, and the dream team is going to continue to work. And that is also important information to get in front of candidates. Mm-hmm. So in addition to, as Beth said, just keep doing what we're doing, I think we need people's ideas.
Hi there. This might be a simple question and an easy yes, but do you, in choosing who this person's going to be, do you look at their old sermons and check out their sermon style, the content of their sermons? It's such an important part, and for some people, the only thing they tune in for.
Obviously, preaching is critical to our online presence, which is, as you saw today, is huge. And so we're really cognizant of that, and I can't imagine a situation in which we wouldn't do our own due diligence, and that means, visiting a place, listening to preaching, looking at past sermons. We aren't just going to look at a name and a resume and say, oh, that looks good. I mean, we've got to dig a lot deeper than that, and do everything we can to make sure that this is a fit for us. If you couldn't hear, that was temperament is being said, and to some extent the culture that someone is coming from. If they're coming from a congregation, what's the culture of that congregation? Is it something that is compatible with ours, but also maybe we can learn something from? So all of that. Go ahead. We don't know.
Well, Beth just said we don't know, and I guess that's true, but I will answer slightly differently and say I doubt it very much. Yes, the question was, will the candidate come here and preach and meet everybody as part of the sort of the final process? Beth's answer was that she does not know, and that's a fair answer. Technically, my answer would be the same, except I will say I kind of doubt that would happen. Don't know, but I kind of doubt that. But I will recommit that we're going to go and visit and look at online streamings of sermons and talk to people. That there's plenty of ways to find out about somebody and how they're doing in the current job or the job they had previously, and we'll follow up on all of those. But the bishop has said that it's not going to be where they might have 3 people come to church and each do a sermon, and then we can all get feedback that's going to be, here's a potential candidate, do your due diligence, what do you think? And then the bishop would not force us to take someone that we didn't conclude had the right temperament and other qualities that we were looking for.
But ideally, if we can convince the bishop to let somebody come, we would certainly hope to do that. I think Jim is realistic. I'm idealistic on this, and we'll see.
I have 2 questions. One from somebody who's not here in person, who asked more about what does it mean for Stephen to maintain a charge to Asbury? He said he was going to maintain a charge. What does that mean? Does anybody else know?
Kathy was going to help with that answer, I think, or she's raising her hand. Go. Right, it's the base, but the good news is that means his voice will still be heard both here and nationally. So.
Is that because it's an extension ministry that they're going to? I mean, what if they change churches?
If he was going to a different church, I think the answer might be different. Yeah. Is that right, Kathy? Yeah. Yeah. Then he would move to whatever church conference that he's in, but because he's not going to a church, he can keep his base here. So, I don't know how many of you were here when Bob Hill left. I know that when he left, I was absolutely devastated. I'd come to this church because of Bob Hill. I walked across the street and heard him preach a sermon, and I went, "Well, I'm in." And I thought, boy, we're never going to be the same, and yet here we are. So that's what gives me hope in all of this and confidence in all of this. We just have to do it right.
So my second question, thank you, and thank you to Kathy. And this relates to Kathy, because my question is, how do we help strengthen and help the staff that are here, that are currently here now, through this transition time and beyond?
Kathy may want to put a twist on this, but I will say give them your unending support. When they reach out and need help, be there and listen. Our staff, just like us, is going to struggle. This is big change and a lot of uncertainty, and even almost more for them than for us. And so, Kathy, we commit to listen and to be there. And if you want to say anything else, feel free. All right.
I think one thing we need to keep in mind is that as selfish as we're feeling about the loss of Stephen, we should also be open-hearted, open-minded about what we can possibly gain. We're going to have a new person who's going to be very qualified, just as Stephen was when he first arrived. And we've enjoyed his company, his leadership, his prayers for the last 12 years. And we're going to get somebody else to continue that. And so I think, along with our grief, we should be expressing some joy that we're sharing the Stephen we know with a larger population of the world. And that's such a blessing that we should feel joyful that we're giving to our neighbors in the South.
Amen. We're giving Paula a workout here.
Now if I don't need it. I have a little trouble trying to say this diplomatically, but one of the things I would like you to look for in our new pastor, because we're used to Stephen, and he is, shall we say, theatrical, you cannot fall asleep in the sermon. He uses a vocabulary that we can all understand. We have had a pastor in the past that I dearly loved, I respected, I liked him as a person. But he was a highly educated man, and he used a vocabulary, at least 5 words in his sermon, that I needed to go home and look up in a dictionary. So if we could have someone to remember that not everybody has a master's degree and that kind of a vocabulary, to be able to come down to earth like Stephen does with his vocabulary, and the rest of our pastors here too. So I hope I didn't step on anybody's toes, but I just wanted to say something. Thank you.
No, I think you echo exactly one of the things we need to look for is somebody who connects to us in ways that we can connect. And that's really going to be very important. So. Anything else? Yeah.
You know, I do remember learning a lot of words from Bob Hill, right? That was very well said. I recall 12 years ago, and some of you up there were involved, we were approached about this young pastor, didn't have any big church experience, right? Somewhat, we were told he was a great preacher. Nobody told us he became a great administrator. I think there's been questions about the appointment. At the end of the day, the bishop has the say. We have a great, I think, particularly with how you've orchestrated this, we'll have a lot of input to it. But that is the Methodist system, right? We had no idea what we were buying into with Stephen. And I would say this, Beverly and I have been here for 40 years, I guess, now. Would have never thought it would be that long. We were attracted to this church because of somebody who some of you probably have only heard of, Ted Whedon. It's why we came here. It's why I changed my career so we could come to Asbury and return to Asbury from the depths of Connecticut. But we have to have faith that between the bishop, who, from what I have seen in a very short time, I did get to talk to him very briefly, he understands this church, more so than the prior bishop, very, very much so. I think you've not said it completely enough. He wants us to be successful for his success. So I got to believe he's going to support us. I think this is going to be a very difficult search. I don't know how we're going to find somebody that's going to be able to move in and have the theatrical capability, the preaching capability. I've never seen an administrator as strong as him in this church, and we've had some very, very good pastors. So I have faith between the bishop, between the governing board, and those that are involved that we're going to make this happen. And who would have ever guessed that Stephen would have turned out to be the great leader for this church that he did?
One of the things I've noticed since coming back to Asbury is that a smaller percentage of our congregation now have been born and raised United Methodist. And the reason Paul and I came back was because we were so concerned about our beloved United Methodist Church and the very, very difficult transition we're going through. I don't even know whether it could happen, but I certainly want to put my oar in the water about getting a strong, educated United Methodist pastor because of the leadership that Stephen has certainly provided, and which has been needed so desperately in this conference through this transition. We're picking up members from who feel they've been abandoned by the United Methodist Church from other churches in this conference, but we need someone who is, and the past history of Asbury has not always been, I was going to use the word pure, and it's so, not all the pastors here or pastors on staff have had United Methodist background. And it's true now that that's the case with some of them. So I would just suggest that we keep that in mind, that I hope this is somebody with a very strong United Methodist background and prepared to help us as a church and as a conference navigate the next few years.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, I just want to thank you all for coming. I mean, it shows you care, and that's just so important. And we're going to continue to have sessions like this. And please talk to members of the PPRC, to the governance board, put your dreams up for the dream team, support our staff, and we're going to be talking to you frequently. We'll try to get out regular updates so that you know what's happening. But certainly feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Jim, post things online at governance at Asbury. What is it? AFUMC. What is it? Thank you. I know. See, we need Deb. Governance at asburyfirst.org. And we'll publish that also. But that's a good place if you just think of something in the middle of the night and you feel compelled to write it down, ship it off. So, Jim, do you want to say any final?
Just to emphasize that we are going to be making individual visits to different core groups within the church. So we're going to meet with the youth, for example, and people working in the youth program. We've got certainly multiple meetings with people connected to outreach, people in the worship part of the ministry here. So and of course the staff. So it's highly likely that each of you will be in at least one, maybe two or three different groups that we caucus with to get feedback and ideas on a more detailed basis. And those meetings are going to start pretty soon because we're not going to let any grass grow under our feet before we give the bishop a clear idea of what we're hoping to find in the new minister.
We're actually starting our first one. It's going to be announced, I think, tomorrow, but we're going to host a session for anybody who's joined in the last 2 years next Sunday, just to talk with our new members because many of them are going to have special concerns that we need to talk through, and we'll continue that as we know we're going into the Christmas season, so things get very busy for everybody, but we'll do our best. So thank you all for being here. We are so grateful. And just remember, continue the good. That's our mantra, continue the good.